January 23, 1963, Beirut, Lebanon. Nicholas Elliott walked into the apartment of his closest friend, Kim Philby. They had known each other for 20 years, worked together in MI6, trusted each other completely. Today, Elliott had come to accuse him of treason. Philby poured drinks, scotch. They always drank scotch together. Elliott sat down and looked at the man he thought he knew. "I've come from London," Elliott said quietly. "There's new evidence. We know you've been working for the Soviets for decades. We know everything." Philby didn't flinch. He took a sip of his drink, smiled that familiar smile, and after 30 years of lying to everyone he knew, Kim Philby finally told the truth. 5 days later, he vanished. He surfaced in Moscow 3 months after that, decorated as a hero of the Soviet Union. Britain's most trusted spy had been the KGB's greatest asset all along. This is the story of the ultimate betrayal from within, the man who fooled everyone, the spy who hunted Soviet agents while being one himself, and the friend who destroyed everything he touched. Cambridge University, 1934. Kim Philby was 22 years old, brilliant, privileged, and searching for meaning. The son of a famous explorer, educated at Westminster and Trinity College, Britain's establishment was his birthright. But 1930s, Cambridge was a crucible of radical politics. The Great Depression had shattered faith in capitalism. Fascism was rising across Europe. Soviet communism promised a scientific alternative. For idealistic young students, Moscow represented hope. A Soviet talent spotter noticed Philby. Arnold Deutsch, an Austrian communist operating undercover in London, identified students with 3 qualities: brilliant minds, establishment connections, and ideological sympathy. Philby had all 3. Deutsch approached him with ideology, not money. The Soviet Union needed help defeating fascism. Britain's ruling class couldn't be trusted to stop Hitler. Only committed socialists could save civilization. Would Philby help? Philby said yes. He was recruited into the NKVD in 1934. His orders were simple: hide his communist sympathies, join the establishment, and burrow deep. He would be a sleeper agent. He might wait decades before being activated. Philby played his role perfectly. He abandoned his communist friends, dated a right-wing Austrian woman to establish anti-communist credentials, reported on the Spanish Civil War for the Times. In 1940, MI6 recruited him. The Soviets had successfully placed an agent inside British intelligence. He was 28 years old. His real career was just beginning. Philby rose rapidly. He was everything MI6 valued: educated, well-connected, fearless, brilliant at analysis. After World War II, he was promoted to head Section 9, the Soviet counterintelligence division. His job was hunting Soviet spies in Britain and Europe. The irony was perfect. The man responsible for protecting Britain from Soviet espionage was a Soviet spy. Every operation MI6 planned against the USSR, Philby knew about. Every agent MI6 recruited in Soviet territory, Philby betrayed. Every secret Britain shared with the United States, Philby passed to Moscow. For over a decade, he was Moscow's man inside the heart of Western intelligence. The body count mounted invisibly. In 1949, MI6 and the CIA planned to infiltrate anti-communist guerrillas into Albania. Philby knew every detail. He warned Moscow. When the guerrillas parachuted in, Soviet-trained security forces were waiting. The agents were captured, tortured, and executed. Hundreds died. Philby expressed appropriate concern at the failure and helped plan the next doomed operation. Soviet agents arrested in Britain. MI6 operations in Eastern Europe that collapsed without explanation. CIA sources in Moscow who vanished. Everyone knew there had to be a leak, but suspicion never settled on Philby. He was too trusted, too British, too competent. Then, in 1951, everything nearly collapsed. 2 other Soviet agents, Burgess and Maclean, were about to be arrested. Both had been recruited at Cambridge in the 1930s by the same Soviet handlers. American codebreakers had cracked Soviet communications, proving Maclean was passing secrets. Philby, now stationed in Washington as MI6's liaison to the CIA and FBI, learned Maclean was compromised. He couldn't warn him directly without exposing himself. He used Burgess. Once Burgess returned to London, he warned Maclean. In May 1951, both men fled to Moscow. The defection was a disaster. MI6 and the CIA demanded answers. Who warned them? Suspicion turned to Philby. He had been their friend. He had been in contact with Burgess before the defection. Philby was recalled to London, interrogated, and forced to resign from MI6 in 1951. But there was no proof, no confession, no evidence that would hold up in court. His friends in MI6, including Nicholas Elliott, believed he had been poorly treated. Elliott and others lobbied for Philby's rehabilitation. In 1955, the Foreign Secretary publicly cleared Philby of being a Soviet agent. Philby resumed intelligence work as a journalist in Beirut, still secretly reporting to MI6. Moscow was delighted. Their agent had survived investigation and returned to useful work. For another 8 years, Philby passed information to the Soviets. But new evidence emerged in 1962. A Soviet defector, Anatoly Golitsyn, provided information that pointed directly at Philby. The accumulated weight of failures, the timing of betrayals, all led back to him. MI6 could no longer ignore it. Nicholas Elliott was sent to Beirut to confront his old friend. The confrontation was devastating for Elliott. Philby didn't deny it. He confessed, explained his ideology, his belief that communism was the future and capitalism was doomed. Elliott was shattered. "How could you?" he asked. "How could you betray everything? Your friends? Your country?" Philby's answer was cold. "I never betrayed my country. I served a higher cause." Elliott offered immunity in exchange for full disclosure. "Tell us everything, and we won't prosecute." Philby agreed. They scheduled another meeting. Philby never showed. On January 23, 1963, he boarded a Soviet freighter in Beirut and vanished. MI6 was humiliated. Their most trusted officer, cleared by the Foreign Secretary, defended by his colleagues, had been a Soviet agent for 30 years. The Americans were furious. Decades of intelligence had been compromised. Agents were dead. Operations had failed. All because one man had chosen Moscow over London. Philby surfaced in Moscow in July 1963. He was awarded the Order of the Red Banner, given a KGB pension, an apartment, and privileges. He had won. He had served the Soviet Union for 3 decades, betrayed countless people, and escaped justice. But winning didn't bring happiness. Moscow was gray, cold, and paranoid. The KGB never fully trusted him. Once a traitor, always a traitor. Philby was isolated. His friends were fellow defectors Burgess and Maclean, both alcoholics, both bitter. Burgess died in 1963. Maclean descended into depression. Philby drank heavily, married multiple times, worked for the KGB training agents, but the glamour faded. The ideology that had sustained him for decades rang hollow in practice. The Soviet Union he had believed in was a lie, a brutal dictatorship that had murdered millions. By the 1970s, Philby was a relic, a Cold War trophy kept on display. Nicholas Elliott never recovered from the betrayal. The man he had trusted, defended, considered one of his closest friends, had been lying to him for 20 years. Every drink they'd shared, every secret they'd discussed, every moment of friendship had been a deception. Elliott left MI6 shortly after. The damage Philby caused is difficult to calculate. Hundreds of agents compromised, operations betrayed. Western intelligence networks rolled up across Eastern Europe. The Albanian operation alone killed hundreds. Soviet counterintelligence used Philby's information to identify and execute countless people who had risked their lives opposing Stalin. Philby died in Moscow on May 11, 1988, at age 76. He received a state funeral with full KGB honors. His obituaries in the West were less kind: traitor, murderer. The man who betrayed his country for an ideology that had collapsed into tyranny. The Cambridge spy ring represented the ultimate inside threat, not enemy agents parachuting in, not coerced traitors passing secrets for money, but true believers, recruited young who spent decades methodically betraying everything they touched from positions of trust. Today, intelligence services study Philby as a case study in how ideology can corrupt brilliant minds, how charisma can deflect suspicion for decades, how friendship and class loyalty can blind people to betrayal happening in front of them, and how devastating it is when the person hunting the spies is the spy. Kim Philby succeeded in his mission. He served Soviet intelligence for over 30 years. He passed enormous amounts of classified information. He escaped justice and died honored by the country he served. By every measure of espionage success, he won. But he spent the last 25 years of his life in exile, an alcoholic, surrounded by the ruins of the ideology he had sacrificed everything to serve. He betrayed his country, his friends, his family, and got agents killed across Europe. And for what? To die alone in Moscow, celebrated by a regime that didn't trust him, in a system that had proven to be everything his youthful idealism claimed to oppose. The question Philby never adequately answered was simple. Was it worth it? He destroyed Elliott's faith. He got hundreds killed. He spent decades lying to everyone he knew. He ended his life in exile, drinking himself to death in a country that had lied as thoroughly to him as he had lied to Britain. Nicholas Elliott once said, Philby's tragedy was that he was never brave enough to admit he'd been wrong. He doubled down on a lie for 50 years until the lie became his entire existence. Kim Philby confessed to 30 years of treason in 1963, then escaped to Moscow, toasted as a hero by the KGB. But heroes don't die alcoholic and alone in exile, mourned by no one who truly knew them. Traitors do. That's the price of the ultimate betrayal from within. You might fool everyone. You might escape justice. You might even win by the metrics of espionage. But in the end, you're left with nothing but the wreckage of every relationship you destroyed and the hollow victory of serving a lie.